welcome back. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from today? We'd love to know. Now, get comfortable, take a deep breath, and let's dive into today's gripping story. They said not to look him in the eyes. They said he was the dog people used as a warning, not a welcome. At the small rescue in rural Vermont, a German shepherd named Shadow had become more sign than soul. Volunteers spoke his name in whispers. Staff taped notes to his kennel door in big red marker. Do not approach. Even the bravest handlers kept a step farther back than they did with any other dog. Shadow did not cry for attention like the others. He did not wag, did not press his body to the bars, did not tilt his head for a treat. He growled, he lunged. When a person came near, especially a man, his lip lifted, teeth bared, eyes hard. The kennel was his fort. Inside it, he could be a wall. For 8 long months he had lived like that. Someone had found him chained to a fence at an empty farm, ribs sharp, coat dull, eyes dark and hollow. People guessed he had been trained to guard, maybe even to scare. No one knew the full story. They only knew this. He hated people, and he didn't seem to want help. By then, most had given up. Unadoptable, they said. Dangerous. The word followed him like a shadow of its own. One quiet morning, the shelter door opened, and Dr. Rachel Moore walked in with her 10-year-old daughter, Laya. Rachel was not shopping for a cute puppy. She was a trauma therapist who worked with fear, habit, and healing. But as she and Laya moved down the row of kennels, something happened when she reached Shadow's run. Their eyes met. The shift did not happen in the dog. It happened in her. Rachel did not walk straight up to the bars. She stopped a few feet back and set a gentle hand on Laya's shoulder so the girl would stop too. They stood there and looked in. Shadow had folded his massive body into the far corner, as if he wanted to shrink into the cement. His coat was patchy, his muscles were tight like wire, but his eyes were wide and awake. They locked onto Rachel's face with a look she knew from her work. Not rage, not challenge, fear. Guarded, practiced fear. What happened to him? Rachel asked, keeping her voice low and soft. Trish, the manager, kind eyes, cautious hands, let out a breath. Found on an abandoned farm, chained. No food, no shelter. He hasn't bitten, but he's come close. Men set him off the worst. As if the dog heard his cue, a male volunteer walked past the row. Shadow shot to his feet with a sound that rolled up from deep in his chest and slammed himself at the bars. Trish flinched. The volunteer recoiled and hurried on. We tried behaviorists, meds, structure, all of it, Trish said, shaking her head. He lets no one in. Rachel kept looking, not at the teeth, but at the tremble that came after the lunge, the way the dog's body gave away how hard he was holding himself together. She saw not just attack, she saw survival. A dog who had learned people meant danger and built himself a castle so high, even kindness could not climb over it. Can I sit here a while? She asked, nodding toward a spot on the floor several feet from the kennel. Trish hesitated. He won't come to you. That's all right, Rachel said. I'm not here to ask him for anything. She folded herself cross-legged on the concrete and pulled a small book from her tote. Laya crouched down beside her, curious but careful. She's always loved animals, Rachel murmured to Trish with a small smile. Dogs most of all. Laya tipped her head, studying Shadow without moving closer. He's not mad, she said in a clear, soft voice, almost like she was telling it to herself. He's scared. He's making himself big so no one can hurt him. Trish raised a brow. Smart kid. She gets it from her mom, Rachel teased, brushing curls from Laya's forehead. Laya grinned, then looked back at the kennel. I want to learn how animals talk without words, she whispered. I want to help them stop being afraid. Rachel opened the book and began to read in a low hum. Not to Shadow, with him. She made a small world of quiet, where he could listen. If he wanted or stare and breathe and know the air around him held no demand. 2 days after that first visit, Rachel found Laya on their back porch with a sketch pad. On the paper was Shadow, not snarling, but curled under a tree, eyes heavy, safe. "I think he could be different," Laya said, still drawing. "If someone gave him a real chance." Rachel sat beside her, tucking a wild curl behind Laya's ear. "Sweetheart, healing like that takes time. It's not easy." "I know." Laya lifted her face. "But you tell your clients that the hard things are the ones worth doing. Maybe he's waiting for us." Those words stayed with Rachel after Laya went to bed. That night, she read through Shadow's file again. She did not read it as a therapist, weighing risk. She read it as a mother who had heard her daughter speak from a place that felt true. In the morning, she submitted an adoption application. At the shelter board meeting, the answer came fast and sharp. Dr. Morgan, the head vet, spoke first. "He's dangerous," he said. "He's unpredictable. We haven't seen real improvement. He belongs in a specialized facility, not in a home, and certainly not in a home with a child." Rachel kept her voice even. "He isn't aggressive by nature. He's afraid. His behavior is trauma, not dominance. He needs steady routine, choice, and safety." Another board member leaned forward. "You're a single parent. Why take this on? Why risk it?" Rachel met their eyes one by one. "I work from home. I have training in trauma recovery, and Laya is not a typical 10-year-old. She is careful. She listens. She is the one who noticed that he watched her without growling. She is the one who asked me to bring him home." Trish cleared her throat. "I watched them," she said. "The girl sat outside that kennel like a little stone. She saw what most adults miss. Shadow didn't lunge at her. That almost never happens. It matters." The debate stretched. Voices rose, then cooled. At last they voted. 4 said yes, 3 said no. The yes came with strict lines, weekly progress updates, appointments with a behaviorist, and an immediate return if there was any incident. Rachel signed the papers. Through the window, she caught Laya's eyes. The small smile that bloomed there said, "I knew you heard me." Getting him to the car was the first test. Shadow would not go near a crate. The click of the latch was enough to send a growl up his throat. Rachel didn't force it. With Trish's help, she set a temporary partition in the back of her SUV, making a space that felt like a den, not a trap. Then she stood back. No pressure, no words. 30 long minutes of quiet coaxing and patience passed before he stepped in on his own. Laya had come to the pickup and sat on the curb while the adults worked, hands folded in her lap, her steady, gaze never leaving him. When Shadow finally climbed into the car, he looked out the side window. Laya lifted her small hand and pressed it to the glass. Not a wave, but a promise. "We will help you heal." The drive home was tight. Shadow panted, muscles coiled like a spring that would not unhook. Laya sat in the front seat, holding her sketch pad like a talisman. Today's drawing was different. Shadow under a tree, and a girl reading beside him. 2 figures in the same picture. When they pulled up to the little farmhouse, the sun sat low, turning the field behind the house to gold. Rachel got out first and left the car doors open so he could watch her. She sat, a long training line on the ground, and backed far away. She did not look straight at him. She waited. Shadow held still a long time. Then he lowered his head and stepped down, tail tucked, moving slow. He followed the line toward the open door. Inside, his space was ready. A crate with no door, soft bedding, a quiet corner, no breakables, no sudden sound makers, everything in the house had been placed with one question in mind. Will this feel safe? Laya peeked around the hall, hope bright in her eyes. Is this his forever spot? Rachel nodded. If he wants it. Shadow stood and watched them, breathing fast. He did not bark. He did not growl. he had walked in on his own feet. Laya believed, really believed, that maybe he was ready to begin again. Progress did not arrive like a trumpet. It came like a whisper. In the first week, he would not eat unless they left the room. He kept to his corner, flinching at new sounds, at the hush of a door, at the sun shifting across the floor. But he didn't growl anymore. He didn't bolt. Each morning, Laya set a fresh bowl near the crate and slid a little drawing beside it. A sun, a heart, a big-eyed dog. "So he knows he's got company," she said. One afternoon, Laya sat on the floor, back to the wall. "Why does he stare at me and still won't come close?" "That's not anger," Rachel said, joining her. "It's caution. He's learning if we're safe. His whole world used to mean danger. He has to test the new rules." "I love him," Laya whispered. "I know," Rachel said. "Loving him means moving at his speed. Watch his ears, his tail, how he shifts his weight. That's his language. He's telling us when he's scared and when he's curious." Laya nodded like a student who planned to remember. By the second week, Shadow ate while they were still in the room, so long as they kept space. He slept heavier, no longer half awake with one eye slit. The tight coil that lived under his skin began to unwind little by little. Then came the night that bent the line of his story. Rachel had finished reading aloud, legs crossed on the rug. Laya was upstairs doing homework. Shadow stood and began to pace, wide, uneasy circles that left faint tracks in the pile of the carpet. Restless, uncomfortable, on edge. Rachel recognized the signs. He moved toward the back door. Rachel rose carefully and reached for the handle. Shadow lunged. The growl cut the air, deep, sharp, his whole body hard, mouth open. Rachel froze, palms open to show she meant no harm. He did not bite. Instead, he rushed past her and out into the yard, circling once before squatting, and she understood he hadn't known how to ask. Her sudden movement scared him, but he hadn't attacked, he'd chosen control. That night, Laya helped hang a little bell on a ribbon by the door. "We'll teach him how to ask," she said. Rachel smiled, hand brushing her daughter's shoulder, "and we'll teach you how to listen." It happened late on a Saturday afternoon. Rachel was in the kitchen preparing dinner. Laya sat cross-legged on the floor nearby, humming as she colored in a picture of Shadow under a snowy tree. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows, a delivery. Truck pulled into their long gravel driveway. Before either of them could react, there was a loud knock at the front door. Then the rattle of the handle. Shadow launched from his corner like a bullet. He didn't bark at first, just moved fast, direct and for. The first time not away from danger, but toward it. He planted himself between Rachel and the front door, body rigid, head low, hackles raised. Then the growl came deep, guttural, protective, the kind of growl that sent chills down your spine. Rachel, instinctively, placed a hand on Hila's shoulder, gently guiding her behind her. She didn't reach for Shadow, didn't speak his name. Instead, she spoke toward the door. "Please leave the package on the porch," she called out evenly. "We'll get it later." Through the window, she saw the startled delivery man set the box down and retreat quickly. Shadow remained in position, unmoving, watching the door even after the truck drove away. Only when the wind had settled and Thessalon's returned did Shadow slowly lower his body, ears still alert, chest still rising fast. "Thank you," Rachel said, softly, not daring to touch him. "You were protecting us, weren't you?" Hila stepped forward, slowly, kneeling a safe distance away. "He didn't just get scared," she whispered. He stood his ground. Rachel met her eyes. "That's trust, Laya, not perfect yet, but it's beginning." Shadow didn't return to his corner that night. Instead, he lay by the front door, the quiet guardian who had finally decided they were his to protect. By mid-inter, a quiet rhythm had settled into their home. Each morning, Rachel and Laya moved gently around Shadow's world, not in control of it, but part of it. Laya read to him from her favorite animal stories, Sitting at a respectful distance, Rachel guided her in understanding his. Signals: a lowered tail meant anxiety. A soft blink meant trust. Meal times were slow, calm rituals with Laya gently placing the bowl closer each day. Progress was measured in inches, not miles, but healing was happening slowly, surely. One snowy morning, Laya stayed home nursing a cold, bundled in blankets by the fireplace. Rachel took Shadow for their usual trail walk alone. The snow was fresh blanketing, the woods in quiet white. Rachel let Shadow off leash. Just a few minutes he'd earned that freedom. Then, something shifted. Shadow stopped, ears perked, nose in the air. A second later, he bolted into the trees. "Shadow!" Rachel called out, heart racing. She followed, crashing through underbrush, her boots sinking in snow. She found him standing over a figure half, buried in white. It was a young man, probably in his 20s barely. Conscious, shivering uncontrollably. Hitchhiking boots were soaked, his leg twisted at a sickening angle. A backpack lay nearby, half covered in snow. He must have fallen, been there for hours. Rachel knelt quickly, weak pulse, shallow breaths. Shadow didn't retreat or bark. He stayed beside the man, tail stiff, but not tucked, occasionally nudging the man's arm with his nose as if checking on him. Rachel called. One gave their location. He's not responsive. Early hypothermia, possible leg fracture. As they waited, Rachel wrapped her coat over the man and leaned close to Shadow. "You didn't run from him," she whispered. "You stayed." When the rescue team, all men, arrived, Shadow tensed, his body stiffened, but he didn't lunge. No snarling, just a low growl, quickly silenced by Rachel's calm presence beside him. "It's okay," she told him. "They're here to help." Shadow stood firm by her side, breathing hard but steady. That night back home, Leia listened in awe as Rachel described what had happened. She looked down at her, drawing a sketch of Shadow, standing tall beside a fallen hiker, and smiled. "Mom," she said softly, "he didn't just change, he chose to." The snowstorm hit just days after the rescue power lines went down across the valley. The house grew colder with each passing hour. Rachel lit a fire in the living room while Leia helped gather blankets and cushions, building a nest near the fireplace. Shadow paced nervously at first, unsettled by the flickering light and the change in routine. "We'll be okay, buddy," Rachel said softly. "It's just stone cold night." Layla set down her sketch pad nearby, a new drawing of the three of them huddled near the fire. "He can sleep close to us," she whispered, "if he wants to." Shadow didn't approach. At first, he settled in his usual spot, just out of reach, just within sight. But sometime around 3 a.m., Rachel stirred from half leap to find Shadow had moved. He now lay curled beside Laya, not touching, but near enough for warmth to pass between them. Rachel didn't say a word. She didn't reach out. She simply added another log to the fire and whispered, "Good night, brave boy." When morning came, the house was still cold, but something inside it had changed. Shadow no longer slept in the far corner. That day he followed Rachel from room to room, still cautious but close. He brushed past her leg in the hallway, pause. Longer beside Laya's chair. That night, as Rachel worked at her desk, Shadow approached. He sat beside her quietly, then leaned just slightly until his head rested gently against her knee. Rachel froze. Then slowly she moved her hand, just an inch, not forcing, not leading, and rested it atop his head. Shadow stayed, and in that moment the distance between fear and trust disappeared. Spring came with a letter. The shelter board officially ended their monitoring period based on the remarkable progress observed. It read, "We consider Shadow's rehabilitation a success, one that will inform our future work." Attached was an invitation. Would Rachel and Shadow return to the shelter to speak with prospective adopters? Rachel agreed. And this time Leia came too, holding Shadow's leash confidently as they walked through the familiar gates. The staff froze. They remembered the snarling, unapproachable creature who had once shaken in the corner of his kennel. Now Shadow moved calmly beside the girl he trusted most. "I can't believe that's the same dog," one volunteer whispered. Inside the education room, a dozen people sat, in a semicircle, some hoping to adopt, others simply. Curious, Rachel stood at the front, Shadow resting at her feet, head near Wyla's hand. "I'm not a dog trainer," she began. "I'm a trauma therapist, and what I've learned from working with people I applied to Shadow." She explained her method: no force, no dominance, no quick fixes. Shadow didn't need to be controlled. He needed to feel safe. He needed to choose connection, not be forced into it. She paused, then looked at Shadow, who now lay calmly, breathing slow and steady. His aggression wasn't the problem. It was his solution, his armor. Our job wasn't to break it. It was to give him reasons to lower it. Laya raised her hand shilly. "I used to think dogs just needed love," she said. "But they need understanding too. Shadow didn't change because we made him. He changed because we waited." A young couple in the back exchanged glances, then asked about a scared shepherd mix they'd seen in the kennels. "Do you think he has hope too?" Rachel smiled. "Every dog has a story. And if you're willing to listen, really listen, healing is always possible." Later that evening, back home, Rachel sat by the fireplace as Laya rested her head on her lap. Shadow lay nearby, one paw stretched toward the warm light, his chest rising and falling in steady peace. On the wall above them hung a timeline, photos documenting every inch of progress. The first time Shadow walked into the house, the night he rang the bell to go outside, the moment he leaned his head into Rachel's hand and tucked. Between the photos was something new, a certificate printed on simple white paper. Laya Moore Jr., animal companion and care volunteer. It was from the shelter, recognizing Harelay in helping Shadow's transformation. Rachel had tears in her eyes when she first saw it. Laya had received it quietly, shilly. "It's not a big deal," she'd said, but Rachel knew it was. It meant Laya had found her, beginning her path. "You helped him heal," Rachel whispered now, brushing Wyla's hair back. "Not just with love, but with patience, with understanding." Ella smiled, looking down at her newest drawing, the three of them sitting under a blooming apple tree. Thisons for spring. In a world so quick to judge, Shadow had become a reminder that aggression is not evil, that fear is not weakness, that healing is possible not through force, but through presence. Rachel looked down at Shadow, who was now watching the fire, relaxed and safe. "You didn't need to be fixed," she whispered. "You just needed to be seen." And for Leela, the journey was just beginning. Shadow wasn't her first rescued soul, but maybe, just maybe, he had shown her who she was meant to.